So welcome to my channel. That argument marked the last one we ever had, occurring after Patricia received the divorce papers, but before we made it to court. During that time, we both put on a show playing roles for each other. I pretended I still wanted to talk things through, even though the lid on our marriage had slammed shut the moment the private investigator handed me the photo of her, indeed me, Bradley Jacobson. By the 5th minute of the first recording, our marriage was already dead, and I was metaphorically shoveling dirt on its grave. So as for Patricia, I'm not entirely sure what she was pretending. Maybe she thought her ongoing affair was still a subject we could discuss. Perhaps she believed we could somehow negotiate staying married while she continued sleeping with Bradley on the side. My wife, Patricia Wilson Anderson, is an attorney. Bradley happens to be one of her assistants, and resolving unreasonable situations in a reasonable way is her profession. I suppose she applies that skill at home, too, voluntarily. Throughout most of our 25-year marriage, I would constantly hear her say, "Matt, be reasonable." So after she got the divorce papers, she added a new phrase to her arsenal: fragile male ego. As in, Matt, this isn't about who I am or am not sleeping with, it's about your fragile male ego. God, how I loathe that phrase. Naturally, we didn't delve too deeply into that final argument before she dropped it. Matt, if you could look beyond your fragile male ego, you'd see that this isn't a threat to you at all. She flashed me her most reassuring, reasonable smile. I don't love him. In a few months, we'll both move on. You and I can still ride off into the sunset together. I have to give Patricia credit, she's nothing if not bold. As she said this, she was absentmindedly running her fingers along the stem of her favourite glass of chilled Australian Chardonnay, which sat next to a manila folder on our kitchen table. Inside that folder were my divorce papers, accompanied by some of the most incriminating photos the private investigator had captured. In other words, the Titanic had hit the iceberg, the orchestra was playing Nearer My God to Thee, and the women and children were being led to the lifeboats. Meanwhile, Patricia was suggesting that if I could just be reasonable and set aside my fragile male ego, we could still make it to port. Patricia still thought we were negotiating, but I had lost all interest in reaching any resolution. I just wanted the conversation to end. Patricia, let's pause for a moment, I interrupted, cutting her off mid-sentence. You keep mentioning my fragile male ego, saying that if I could get past it, everything would be fine. What exactly do you mean by that? She frowned, slightly offended by the interruption. Well, Matt, it's simple. You're afraid of competition, afraid you won't measure up. She smiled again, gently but with a touch of condescension. But darling, you don't need to worry, you're my guy, my man. So what about Bradley? I asked. She blushed. Bradley? Well, Bradley's just a toy, like a workout machine. I'm not planning to replace you or stop loving you. You don't have anything to worry about. I gave her a slightly confused, slightly skeptical look the kind husbands use when they want their wives to feel superior, usually as a tactic to get out of something. So just to be clear, you think I'm worried that you'll stop loving me or swap me out for a younger guy? She nodded, her smile growing wider. And you believe that makes me vulnerable, that I need reassurance? Exactly, and darling, you have nothing to be concerned about. I spoke slowly, as if trying to piece everything together. And this vulnerability is tied to the fact that I'm a man. She patted my arm gently, in that same condescending way. Oh, honey, it's not just you. All men have fragile egos. Her smile broadened. Part of what we wives do is support our men and keep their confidence up. I wanted to scream at her, to ask how on earth sleeping with a 25-year-old was supposed to support me. But I knew that would only make her dig in her heels further. I wasn't surprised that Patricia bought into all that pop psychology nonsense about women being emotionally stronger than men. We'd been circling around that garbage for years, but I was exhausted. We were almost at the finish line, and I was done playing this game. Patricia, you've been using that phrase for a long time now, I said, locking eyes with her. I've let it slide because one thing I've learned in 25 years of marriage to you is to pick my battles. But if there's one thing I want you to understand today, it's how utterly ridiculous this whole argument is. She started to protest, but I pressed on. The reason people focus on the fragile male ego is because it seems unnatural. Think about it. How many times have you seen a man get hit where it hurts the most? She nodded, almost willing to let me go on for a bit before pulling me back into her version of reason. 20 of times. And exactly. It's funny to women because men are always seen as strong, and this one little thing can make most of them double over. Gasping for air, the big, tough guy suddenly curls up in a ball. You get it, right? Yes, but seeing a woman in that same situation wouldn't be funny, would it? She nodded, but I could tell she was losing track of my point. So why not? If one person doubling over in pain is funny, why not the other? Because that's violence. A man hitting a woman, that's violence. And a woman hitting a man isn't. I shook my head. Never mind. We're getting off topic. I took a deep breath and tried again. The point is, it's the same with the ego. When I go to work every day, my friends joke about everything: my skills in bed, my weight, my thinning hair, anything they can poke fun at. So now, imagine if your friends treated you the same way, I said. Picture walking into the office and having every insecurity picked apart. How would that make you feel? Yin. God, she replied, I can't even imagine a woman doing that to her friend, and certainly not all the time. Well, that's exactly what we do as men, I said. The big, strong guys, we shrug it off, make a joke, and carry on. I patted her arm, mimicking her earlier gesture of condescension. I wondered if she noticed. See, truth is, the only place I let myself be fragile is here at home. This is where I take off my armor, where I'm vulnerable, trusting that you won't exploit it. So what you call my fragile male ego is just me letting my guard down in the one place I thought I could. Patricia smiled, but I could see her gearing up for another abuse battle. That's the whole point, Matt. Here you're safe. You can be vulnerable. I'm not going to throw away what we have because of a fling. So I took off my glasses, rubbing the bridge of my nose. You still don't understand, Patricia. I believed you when you said I was the best lover in the world, even though I knew that wasn't really true. I've only had one lover in the past 25 years, not exactly a lot of experience, I said with a bitter smile. I believed you when you said I was enough, that my body still excited you, that I was perfect you. I took you at your word, even though I knew you were just trying to boost my ego. I chose to be vulnerable with you because I thought I could trust you, and you betrayed that trust. I slammed my hand on the table, raising my voice as the words poured out. Her eyes widened, and she fell silent, so I took a breath, trying to steady myself. About 6 months ago, I started noticing you weren't as careful with my vulnerability anymore. I saw the way you looked away when I took off my shirt, how you closed your eyes during sex. I heard the snide comments about needing to hit the gym or lay off the beer. Patricia looked at me stunned, but I pressed on. You stopped sharing your day with me or asking about mine. I noticed you weren't around anymore, even before you started sleeping with Bradley. I realized you were no longer a safe space for me. You weren't going to protect my vulnerability. Matt, as she paused, words failing her for once. So I looked her squarely in the eyes, mine probably just as glossy as hers. I tried to fight for us, Patricia. I asked you out to dinner more, complimented your clothes, tried to plan vacations, anything to remind you that you were still special to me. I dressed better, started working out, hoping you'd remember how much I meant to you. I glanced down at my hands, unable to let her see the tears welling up. But it didn't work. You always found excuses to cancel dinners or back out of vacations. When I complimented your clothes, I could see the worry in your eyes, wondering if I had figured out you were dressing for someone else. I took another deep breath before looking back up at her. Later, when you started picking fights just to avoid sleeping with me, I knew I had lost. You'd forgotten I was special, and you were already on your way to not being special to me anymore. I never picked fights to avoid sex, she protested. I groaned, frustrated. Seriously, Patricia? That's what you're taking away from this? Can't you at least be honest with yourself, if not with me? You've been pushing me away for 6 months. She glanced up at me briefly, then back down at her hands. Anyway, I shrugged. Yes, back then my ego was fragile. I spent a lot of time in my office with the door closed, grieving the loss of our relationship. I tried to put on a brave face so you wouldn't see how deeply you were hurting me. I found reasons to leave the house, to avoid being around someone who clearly didn't want to be near me and only wanted to hurt me more. Patricia's expression was one of shock. I smiled slightly and gently patted her hand again, so be happy to know that my fragile ego has healed. I found other ways to fill my time, other people who made me feel appreciated. Her eyes widened, a question forming silently. I smirked. No, I didn't cheat on you. But I did notice that some of the women at the gym didn't seem to mind my body as much as you apparently do. By the time I was talking to a lawyer, you wouldn't have even known my fragile male ego had been hurt in the first place. So are we done? I asked, thinking the conversation had finally reached its conclusion. I had said what I needed to, and for a moment, I thought she might have actually listened. Maybe, just maybe, we could finally move on. But of course I had forgotten I was married to a lawyer, and for her there was no such thing as a case that couldn't be won. Matt, this wasn't necessary, she yelled. Yes, I admit I've been distracted lately, but I never stopped loving you. In my world, you were always my number one. I'm sorry I didn't realize how fragile you were, how much I hurt you. Patricia kept talking, painting these beautiful pictures with her words, but I had stopped listening. There was that word again, fragile. She still didn't understand, and in that moment I knew she probably never would. I wasn't trying to be polite anymore. Patricia, stop, I snapped. I'm sure she could hear the anger in my voice, even though I tried to hide it. I took a long, slow breath and exhaled. You still don't get it, do you? You still think this is about my fragility, about my fragile male ego, right? Honey, there's nothing shameful about it, she said softly. Patricia, listen. All men know all people have fragile egos, and we trust those we care about to protect them. Well, of course, but men are particularly fragile. I leaned in slightly as if I were about to reveal something confidential. I tried hard to keep the sarcasm at bay, but she wasn't making it easy. Patricia, I've spent the last 25 years trying to figure out how to be honest with you without hurting your feelings. When you'd asked me if that lipstick worked for you, or if the dress made you look fat, I had to come up with something that wouldn't upset you, but also wouldn't let you leave the house looking like a clown or squeezed into a sausage casing. Patricia blushed, her eyes widening, clearly not used to this level of honesty. And suddenly, I realized I found the whole situation a little amusing. Patricia, when I say things like, honey, I'm not sure that lipstick goes with your outfit, or maybe you should change, I'm not comfortable with the neighbors ogling your cleavage all night, I was giving you an excuse. I pretended to be unsure of myself, or that my so-called fragile male ego was at stake. And do you know why I did that? She shook her head. Because I didn't want to bruise your ego. That's ridiculous, Patricia fumed. I can remember plenty of times when you were very clear about something not looking good. So I smirked. Oh, I admit, I've slipped up a few times. Like the time I said your eyeshadow made you look like a mistress, or when I agreed that yes, that dress does make your butt look big. You gave me those wounded eyes, thanked me for my honesty, and we endured weeks of coldness in the bedroom. That's when I learned that total honesty isn't always a good idea when it comes to giving you my opinion. So you've been lying to me for 25 years. Patricia's temper was reaching its boiling point. It's more like I've been offering you a carefully edited version of the truth, I replied. I told you you were the most beautiful woman in the world, that your trips to the gym took years off you, that even the Venus de Milo couldn't compare to your figure. I showered you with compliments, just like you did for me, to show you how I see you and yes, to boost your ego. So my ego isn't fragile, Patricia snapped. Patricia, you have a big butt, I said calmly. She looked at me as if I'd just slapped her. What? She gasped. I smiled. You've got stretch marks, your breasts are sagging, your roots are showing, and your teeth are yellowing. All those expensive creams you buy don't hide the wrinkles, and you've developed a double chin. It's time to start aging gracefully, because fighting it isn't working. Her eyes widened as each blow landed perfectly. Patricia, remember how you feel right now. Hold on to it. Now imagine I told you I was having an affair with a younger woman at the office, someone 10 or 20 years your junior, with a tight body and perky breasts. She's pulling out all the stops because it's still fresh and exciting for her. Imagine me coming home to you after being with her a couple of times a week. How do you think your ego went all that? Patricia paled, her voice soft. Yes. Said that's what you never understood, I continued. I'm not blind. You're not the most beautiful woman in the world. I could probably walk outside and find a handful of women on a street who are more attractive than you. I paused as I watched her head lower, tears rolling down her face. But to me, you were the most beautiful, the funniest, the best. When I saw your imperfections, I also saw the life we'd built together. Your breasts sagged because you used them to feed our children. Your body changed because you carried them. The lines on your face, those came from all the times we laughed, saw all the miles we've traveled together, and I cherished every single one of them. She looked up at me, tears still falling. It felt like that climactic moment in a boxing match, right before the knockout punch. She sobbed and asked, "What do you see now?" Said, "Lord, I thought she's practically begging for it. It would be so easy to finish her off, to give her a blow that would leave her shattered, bouncing from one meaningless relationship to the next, trying to prove she still had it." Then there she was, chin up, bracing herself for the final hit. But that's just it. It wasn't about delivering a knockout punch anymore. In truth, it wasn't about Patricia at all anymore. She had looked in the mirror, seen time slipping away, and decided she could recapture her youth in the arms of a younger man. And when she got caught, she tried to stand tall, using clever words and bold statements. But now we both knew she was weak, small, and would ultimately end up alone. As for me, I had already shed my tears. I cried them in the car, behind my office door, and in a park not far from our home. I had spent months hiding my pain while mourning the loss of our marriage. Now, I had to focus on the future. See, the first step was deciding who I wanted to be. Did I want to see a man who too cheap shot? A man who won a pointless battle against a woman who had already ruined her own life? To bully? I wanted to see someone I could be proud of, a good man, a merciful man, an honest man. I took a deep breath and placed my hand over Patricia's once more. What do I see now? I repeated. I see a woman with whom I shared some of the best years of my life. I see someone I trusted with my vulnerability until I couldn't anymore. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. And I see someone I would genuinely miss. Patricia stood up, forcing a crooked smile, which didn't do much to hide the tears streaming down her face. It doesn't have to be this way, she said. We can find our way back. No, we can't, I replied with a sigh. You're right about one thing, Patricia, I'm not fragile. But my trust was. I'll never be able to take down my walls again. I'll never be able to let you in. Maybe we could live together, share a bed, go on vacations, make some new memories. But I'll always be wondering, are you judging me? Are you comparing me to someone else in bed? Are you staying because you love me, or just because it's comfortable? So that's not true, she protested. I'm not going to live like that, I said, more firmly this time. I probably have another 30 or 40 years left, and I don't want to spend them with someone I can't trust, pretending to feel secure when I don't. I don't deserve. And honestly, if you really loved me, you wouldn't ask me to. For all her legal expertise, Patricia wasn't hard to read, at least not for me. I could see her mentally trying out different arguments, searching for one that might work. And then, in a split second, I saw the realization hit her. It was over. The light in her eyes dimmed. Once Patricia stopped fighting, the divorce was surprisingly quick. We traded jewelry for tools, a TV for my partly restored Mustang. We sold the house, split everything, and avoided expensive lawyer fees. So that even when the divorce is finalized, it doesn't really end. I still see Patricia at the kids' birthdays, family holidays, anniversaries. Sometimes she brings a date. I usually have someone by my side too. For the last year or so, it's been the same woman, and judging by the look in Patricia's eyes, she knows what that means. I try not to gloat, but sometimes my ego, well, it's still a little fragile. Thanks for listening all the way through. Catch you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.